The 43rd floor of Hargrove Tower never slept. Even at 11:47 p.m., the building breathed. Marcus knew the exact sound of every floor. Tonight, something was wrong. He stepped out, his charcoal suit still immaculate. The Hargrove Capital offices were dark, glassy, undisturbed. A cathedral of commerce. At 38, Marcus Hargrove had built a private equity firm worth $11 billion through two weapons: intelligence and obsessive precision. His therapist called it OCD. Marcus called it a system. He pushed his office door open and stopped. She was asleep in his chair. She was wearing the gray uniform of the building's contracted cleaning staff. The name embroidered above her chest pocket read Lena. On his meticulously ordered desk sat a half-eaten packet of crackers and a paper cup of vending machine coffee. This was, by any measurable standard, a crisis. He should call building security. He lifted his phone, and then she made a sound. A soft, involuntary exhale. Marcus lowered his phone. He stood there, watching a stranger sleep in his chair, and something happened that he could not have predicted. He waited. Lena Vasquez had not meant to fall asleep. The 43rd floor was always her last stop. Tonight she had sat down in the big chair just for a moment. Marcus had a rule for most situations. He had rules for all situations, actually. That was rather the point. But for workplace infractions specifically, the rule was unambiguous. Swift, documented, proportionate consequence. He had terminated employees for less. A senior analyst, 18 months ago, had falsified a single line in a quarterly report. Gone within the hour. A junior associate had used Marcus's private elevator without authorization. Terminated. A vendor had arrived 6 minutes late to a pitch meeting and Marcus had simply stood, closed his folder, and left. He was not known for patience. He was not known for second chances. He stood at the edge of his own office and looked at this woman sleeping in his chair, and he could not make himself do the obvious thing. It wasn't compassion, he told himself. Not yet. It was curiosity, the same detached, clinical curiosity with which he approached all anomalies. She was an anomaly. He was simply gathering data. He moved quietly into the room, quietly enough that her breathing didn't change, and stood at the side of his desk. Up close, the details resolved. The uniform was clean but thin at the elbows. Her shoes were worn through at the left heel. There was a small ink stain on her right index finger that no amount of scrubbing had quite removed. The particular stain of someone who wrote things by hand, who made lists or filled out forms, or maybe, he thought, wrote letters. The cracker packet. The cold coffee. The phone lying face down with its cracked screen. Dark now. His eyes moved to the pen she had displaced. 3 centimeters. His hand moved automatically toward it. He needed to move it. The wrongness of it was a physical itch. And in reaching, he accidentally brushed the desk surface. The sound was faint. A whisper of sleeve against wood. But she woke. Not gradually. All at once. The way people wake when they've been woken by fear too many times, when the body has forgotten how to rise slowly. She was upright in a single motion, and for one raw, unguarded second before she saw him, her face held everything. Exhaustion. Disorientation. Something that lived just below panic. Then she saw him. And the color left her face entirely. "Oh God!" She was on her feet before the words finished leaving her mouth, the chair rolling back and striking the credenza. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, I only sat down for a second, I wasn't, please, stop." His voice came out quieter than he intended. She stopped. Her hands were clasped in front of her, knuckles pale, and she was looking at him the way people look at the edge of something very high. The current was still running up the back of his neck. The chair had struck the credenza. The crumbs were still on the desk. His pen was still 3 centimeters from its designated place. And she was standing in front of him looking like someone waiting to be told the worst. Marcus had a rule for most situations. He looked at her face, really looked, for perhaps the first time since entering the room, and found that the rule for the moment had nothing to say. "Sit down," he said. She stared at him. "Not in my chair," he clarified. "The one by the window. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have called security or something and you would have paused too?" Tell me in the comments. She sat, perched, really, at the absolute edge of the guest chair by the floor-to-ceiling window. The city 43 floors below her, a glittering, indifferent audience. Her hands were folded in her lap with the rigid discipline of someone performing calm they did not feel. Marcus moved to his desk. He picked up the displaced pen and returned it to its position. He straightened it once, straightened it again. Then he folded his hands and looked at her. You work for Premier Building Services, he said. Yes. How long? She blinked. 8 months. This floor is your last rotation. Yes. You finish at 11:30. Usually. A pause, barely a breath. I'm sorry. I know there's no excuse. I'll go. If you need to report me, I understand. Please. If there's any way. Her voice caught on something, and she pressed her lips together hard. Marcus watched the effort it took her to hold herself together. What's your name? He said. Not a question, a rearrangement. Lena Vasquez. How many jobs do you work, Miss Vasquez? Another blink. She hadn't expected that question. Neither, honestly, had he. 2, she said. Hours per week, combined. She looked at him for a moment, a flicker of something that wasn't quite suspicion but lived in the same neighborhood. About 70. Marcus was quiet. The air filtration system cycled. Outside, a distant siren moved through the city and faded. The coffee is cold, he said finally. She looked at the cup. I know, I'm sorry. I wasn't criticizing it. He stood, moved to the small credenza to his right, the one she'd struck with the chair. He noted, resisting the urge to check it for marks, and opened the panel that housed his private espresso machine. It was a machine he used precisely once per day at 7:14 a.m., and cleaned immediately after. He had never made coffee for anyone else in this office. He made 2 cups. He set one in front of her and took his to his chair, which he would need to have professionally wiped, he noted, before he could feel settled in it again. But that was a problem for a different moment. Lena Vasquez looked at the espresso cup like it might be a trap. Drink it, he said. Then tell me why you're working 70 hours a week. She told him more than she intended to. That happens sometimes, Lena had learned when someone asked a direct question with no performance of sympathy behind it. No tilted head, no practiced, oh, that's so hard. Just a straightforward request for information, delivered by a man who looked at her like she was a problem he was genuinely trying to solve. Her mother's name was Carmen. Stage 3 cervical cancer, diagnosed 8 months ago, which explained, though Lena didn't say this, why 8 months was also how long she'd been working the cleaning shift. The treatment was working partially. Enough to extend, not enough to cure. The medical costs were, she used the word substantial, which was the thinnest possible container for what she meant. Her daughter Sophia was 6. She lived with Lena and Carmen in a 2-bedroom apartment in Sunnyside. The night nurse, a woman named Pearl, who had been an answered prayer, cost $180 per shift, 4 nights a week, which Lena calculated to the dollar in her head every single morning before she got out of bed. She said carefully, managing. Marcus listened without interrupting. He had not touched his espresso. His hands were flat on the desk, and he watched her with an attention that was not warm, exactly, but was entirely without judgment, like a doctor reviewing a chart, reading it with full seriousness because the data mattered. Your day job, he said when she finished. The laundromat. Yes, hourly rate, she told him. He didn't react, but something behind his eyes shifted. And here, she told him that too. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you have a 6-year-old daughter. Sophia, yes. When do you see her? The question landed differently than she expected. Not when do you find time or how do you manage, just when do you see her? Simple and direct, as if it were the only thing that actually mattered in all the arithmetic she'd just recited. Lena's hands tightened in her lap. Mornings, she said. I'm home by midnight, I'm up by 6. I make her breakfast. I walk her to school if my shift starts late enough. That's 2 hours. Sometimes 3. He nodded once, slowly, as if filing this. Why are you asking me all this? She said. The question came out steadier than she felt. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she absolutely did not expect. He stood, walked to the window, and stood with his back to her, looking out at the city below. In the reflection of the glass, she could see his face, not the controlled executive face, but something underneath it. Something that was working through a problem it hadn't anticipated. "I have a condition," he said to the glass. "That's not an invitation for sympathy. It's a relevant fact. This office is..." He paused, selected the word carefully. "Significant. To my ability to function." She waited. "You disturbed it," he said. "That should have been the end of it. I know. I said should have been." Silence. He turned back from the window. His expression had not changed. Still measured, still precise, but there was something in his posture that was different. Less architecture, more person. "There's a protocol for employee complaints," he said. "I could file one with Premier Building Services. Grounds for termination." Her face went very still. "I'm not going to do that." She exhaled, once, involuntarily, and hated herself for it. "What I'm going to do," Marcus said, moving back to his desk and opening his laptop with the specific deliberate motion of a man who had made a decision and was already 3 steps into executing it, "is look at what options exist within this company for your situation." She stared at him. I'm sorry, what?" Hargrove Capital has a non-executive support staff division. Facilities coordination, document management, reception operations. Entry-level positions pay significantly above what you're currently earning, combined and include full benefits, health insurance, which you clearly need. "I'm not on your staff. Not yet." The words dropped into the room and didn't make a sound. Lena looked at him. She looked at this man. This rigid, precise, complicated man who had walked into his office at midnight to find a stranger asleep in his chair and had, instead of doing the obvious, made her a cup of coffee and was now opening a job portal on his laptop. "Why?" she said. He didn't look up from the screen. "Why? What? Why are you doing this?" A pause. His fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. "I have an instinct for poor systems," he said. "You are a productive, reliable person being failed by a poor system. Correcting poor systems is what I do." She should have accepted that. It was, on its surface, a complete answer. But she was 31 years old and she had been invisible to people like him her entire life, and she was not going to let him flatten this into an efficiency problem. "That's not the whole reason," she said quietly. His fingers stayed still on the keyboard. "No," he said after a moment. "It's not." He looked up then. And she saw it. The thing he kept behind the performance of precision. The thing that none of his systems could fully contain. A loneliness so well organized it had almost become invisible. A man who had spent so long being the most controlled person in every room that he had forgotten what it felt like to simply be in the room with another person. "My sister," he said, then stopped. She waited. She struggled. For a long time. "And I was very focused on my systems." He looked back at the screen. "I missed it." 3 words. The whole weight of something that had happened and couldn't be undone. Compressed into 3 words. Every one of us has someone we wish we'd shown up for differently. If this hits you somewhere real, leave a comment. Who are you thinking of right now? Lena did not say she was sorry. She had a feeling he had been receiving inadequate sorries for a long time and they had not helped. What she said was, "Her name?" A long pause. Something moved through his face that he clearly hadn't prepared a system for. "She is," he said. "Now." "Good," said Lena simply. "That's good." They sat in the quiet of the 43rd floor for a moment, this unlikely pair, while the city moved 43 stories below them, indifferent and glittering and full of its own impossible math. Marcus worked fast when he decided something. By 12:40 a.m., he had pulled the Hargrove Capital HR database, identified 2 open positions in the Facilities Coordination Department, cross-referenced their benefit packages, and drafted a preliminary internal referral memo recommending Lena Vasquez for accelerated interview consideration. He did all of this with Lena sitting across from him, which was, he noted, entirely unlike him. He did not work in front of people. he did not allow his process to be observed. And yet he found oddly that her presence did not disrupt his thinking. She was quiet in a way that was not vacant. The quiet of someone who had learned to be still because stillness conserved energy she couldn't afford to waste. She had drunk the espresso. She had not asked him to stop working or explain each step. She simply sat with the particular dignified patience of someone who had been waiting for something good for a long time, and had learned not to reach for it too fast. The coordinator position, he said. It's days, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. That changes your mornings with your daughter. She said nothing, but her hands loosened slightly in her lap. Benefits activate after 60 days. Health insurance covers dependents, and I'm checking. Yes. It includes extended family members under specific household circumstances. He made a note. Your mother may qualify. She made a sound then. Barely anything. A small compressed sound that she shut down immediately. But he heard it. He did not comment on it. He understood the etiquette of private pain, even if he had sometimes failed to honor it with grace. The pay differential, he continued, between this position and your combined current income is, he paused, did the calculation. Significant. Enough to cover your current night nurse hours and still net a positive. He turned the laptop so she could see the screen. She looked at the number for a long time. There's an interview process, he said. I can't override that, nor would I. But a referral from me carries weight. You would be genuinely competitive for the role. Lena looked up from the screen. Her eyes were very bright, and she was doing an extraordinary job of keeping everything in its container. But the edges were showing. You don't know me, she said. You walked in here 20 minutes ago and you didn't even know my name. I know what I need to know. Which is? He considered. You work 2 jobs at 70 hours a week and you still stop to check your phone for news about your mother. You're competent. This floor has been consistently well maintained. You could have made excuses tonight. You didn't. And you asked about my sister's name when most people would have moved straight to gratitude. She blinked. You're a person who notices people, he said, with the slight awkwardness of someone articulating something they're not used to saying. That's not a small skill. It's actually quite useful in a support coordination role. Lena looked at him for a long time. Then she laughed, a soft, involuntary, exhausted laugh, and pressed her hand over her mouth as if surprised by her own reaction. What? He said. Nothing. You're just very strange. I'm aware. I mean that as a compliment. He nodded once, accepting it with the air of someone not entirely sure what to do with compliments but willing to catalog this one. The interview is Thursday, he said. Can you make 9 a.m.? I have a morning shift at the laundromat. I'll have my assistant contact Premier Building Services and arrange a schedule adjustment for the day. You won't lose the pay. She stared at him. I have a budget for operational problem solving, he said, with what she was beginning to recognize as his version of dry humor. This qualifies. Another silence, different from the ones before. This one had something in it. Warmth, maybe, or the very beginning of relief, which is its own fragile and precious thing. Mr. Hargrove, she said. Marcus, she paused at that. Then, Marcus. You didn't have to do any of this. No, he agreed. Most people in your position would have called security. Yes. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the window, at the reflection of the room. The two of them in this unlikely configuration. The city patient and indifferent beyond the glass. Because you look tired, he said. Not lazy, not careless. Tired. There's a difference. My systems are good at catching a lot of things. A pause. They occasionally miss the human ones. It was, Lena thought, the most honest thing she'd ever heard a powerful man say. She stood. She gathered the cracker packet, the empty coffee cup, and placed them in her cleaning cart with the automatic efficiency of someone who had cleaned up after themselves in other people's spaces for a long time. Then she stopped. She reached into the small zippered pocket of her cart and produced a single photograph, worn at the edges. A little girl with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile that was frankly unreasonable in its intensity. She put it on his desk, to the right of the pen, not disturbing it, and he looked down at it. Sophia, she said, Age 5. This was the day I got the laundromat job. She made me wear my good shoes. He looked at the photograph for a long time. She's going to hear about Thursday, Lena said quietly. Because I tell her everything. And when I do, I'm going to tell her that a man was kind to her mother when he didn't have to be. Marcus looked up. That matters, she said. Even if nothing comes of the interview. The kindness is real either way. He looked at the photograph for another moment. Then he picked it up carefully, returned it to her hand. Come Thursday, he said. Something will come of it. Act 5. What gets returned 3 months later? The 43rd floor smelled like coffee at 9 a.m. This was new. Lena Vasquez, Facilities Coordination Associate. The title still sent a small electric thrill through her when she saw it on her badge. Had started the informal habit of ensuring the executive floor's coffee station was stocked and running before the 9 a.m. briefings. Nobody had asked her to. It wasn't in her job description. She'd simply noticed that the floor ran better when people weren't navigating a caffeine deficit on top of a full calendar. She noticed things. As it turned out, that was quite useful in a support coordination role. She had been in the position for 11 weeks. She was good at it, systematically good, in the way that surprised people who had formed opinions about her before watching her work. She remembered preferences without being asked to. She solved logistical problems before they became actual problems. She had, within her 3rd week, quietly reorganized the document management filing system in a way that saved the senior associates approximately 4 hours per week collectively, which Marcus had discovered and noted without comment beyond a brief email that read efficient. She had printed the email and put it on her refrigerator. Sophia thought it was hilarious. Efficient, she repeated in her most serious voice, in the manner of a 6-year-old performing an impression of someone very important. And Lena had laughed until her eyes watered. Carmen was better. Not cured, not that clean. But the treatment, supplemented now by the insurance that had activated at day 61 with the precision of a promise kept, had gained ground. The last scan had used a word that Carmen's oncologist was careful not to overstate, but that Lena held in. Both hands like something delicate and luminous, responding. Pearl still came 4 nights a week. That was not yet something Lena could change. But the math had shifted. The horrible crushing weight of it had become, instead, a heavy thing she could actually carry. The difference was significant. The difference was breath. She was walking past Marcus's office at 9:22 a.m. when his door opened. Ms. Vasquez. She stopped. In 11 weeks she had moved from Lena at midnight to Ms. Vasquez in daylight hours, which was his version of professional appropriate and which she respected, even if it occasionally made her want to remind him that he had once made her espresso at midnight and told her about Grace. Sir, I have a situation. Okay. He held out a manila folder. The Morrison account filing has a cross-referencing error that's been reclassified incorrectly since Q2. It's going to create a cascading issue in the year-end audit if it's not caught before. I caught it, she said. Last Thursday. It's been corrected and the relevant parties have been notified. I sent a summary to your assistant. It should be in the briefing packet for this morning. He looked at her. Then he looked at the folder in his hand. Page 4, she said helpfully. He opened the folder to page 4. A long pause. I see, he said. Was there anything else? He looked up. And she saw it again. The thing she'd seen at midnight 3 months ago. The thing that lived behind all his systems. The part of him that was just a person. But there was more ease in it now. Less like a crack in armor and more like a window that had learned it was allowed to be open. There's a position opening, he said. Senior coordinator. It would involve project oversight across 3 floors, direct interface with department heads, and a salary adjustment. He paused. It was posted internally this morning. I wanted to ensure you were aware of it before the general announcement. She looked at him. I'm not offering it to you, he said quickly, with the particular precision of a man who had learned some lessons about the appearance of impropriety. I'm informing you of its existence. The process is entirely merit-based. Runs it. I understand. You would be competitive. You said that last time? Last time I was also right. She smiled. You were. A beat of quiet between them. The comfortable kind. The kind that takes time to build and means something once it's there. Marcus, she said, and she watched him register the shift, the midnight name in the daylight world. He waited. Thank you, she said. Not for the job posting. For 3 months ago. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you've thanked me adequately. I know. I'm thanking you one more time anyway. He considered this. Then, with the slight careful movement of a man attempting something he was still practicing, how is your mother? She felt it land, the warmth of it, the fact that he'd remembered, that he'd asked. Responding, she said. The word carried its full weight. She's responding. He nodded once. Good, he said. That's good. She heard the echo of her own words from 3 months ago return to her. That's good. That's good. And she thought about how the smallest phrases can travel through time and come back changed, carrying more than they started with. She tucked the folder under her arm. I'll apply for the position, she said. On my own merits. I would expect nothing less. She was 3 steps down the hall when she heard him. Ms. Vasquez. She turned. He was standing in his doorway, the morning light from the floor-to-ceiling windows catching the gray at his temples, the carefully maintained armor of his excellent suit. Sophia, he said. The gap-toothed one. She nodded. Is she still... He stopped. Tried again. Does she still make you wear the good shoes? Lena felt something expand quietly in her chest. Every chance she gets, she said. Something moved through his face that she was fairly sure, in a different life or a different man, might have become a smile. Good, he said, and went back into his office. She stood in the hallway for a moment, 43 floors above the city, in her good shoes, with a job she'd earned and a mother who was responding and a daughter who believed in her completely. And she thought about how life turns on the smallest pivots. A chair. An hour of exhaustion in the wrong place at the right time. A man who could have called security and instead made coffee. A system, she thought, that had finally worked. And here's what I want to leave you with. Lena never asked for charity. She asked, without knowing she was asking, for someone to see her. Really see her, past the uniform and the exhaustion and the quiet way people like her get made invisible. Marcus never planned to be kind. He just couldn't. In the end, let the humanity in front of him go uncounted. Who in your life is working this hard and going this unseen? And what's one thing you could do this week to change that? Drop it in the comments, because that answer might matter more than you think.